Hey everybody, I ended up screwing on my back the other day when I was at work, and so rather than leaving you guys without a video this week because I can't paint, if you can't move your arm correctly, you can't paint right. So rather than leaving you guys without a painting this week, I decided I'd do something a little bit different. Hopefully this is something you enjoy. If it is, let me know and I'll continue to do it in the future. Also, I need to probably get a haircut. Just throwing it out there as another thing that's happening. Once I hit 1,000 subs, which we're very close to, I do want to do something special. And I'm going to do a live stream where I paint with you guys and we can maybe work together on a painting. And I think that would be fun. So stay tuned. I'll post about it on this channel. I'll post about it on Twitter. Go ahead and follow me on Twitter. I'll appear like, wah, right there on screen. And then you can just go and do so. So anyway, let's get on with the actual subject matter of this video. A little while back, a series of posters came out for the upcoming movie Ready Player One that a lot of people got mad about. Basically, they accused them of ripping off all these classic movies. But today, I want to talk about why I don't think it's a ripoff necessarily, and instead, a different subject matter entirely. So, there's basically three different things when it comes to art. There's ripping off, there's quoting, and then there's references. So let's talk about references first, because a lot of people think that references are not okay to use in art. Short answer, totally are, because everyone uses them. And we know that because we can see some of the great masters like Caravaggio, the guy who invented cellar lighting, using references. We know he used references because in this picture, Young Sick Bacchus, I'm going to pronounce every single name that's not like English incorrectly in this, just so you know. I'll make sure the names pop up on screen though. Young Sick Bacchus, we know that he used a reference of himself because at this time of his life he had jaundice and he's looking at himself in the mirror and seeing the yellowing of his skin and painting it as he's seeing it. This is okay as a reference. He's using a reference appropriately. It's okay to take inspiration from and use colors from other things and incorporate them into your own pieces. You're okay to look at something and then paint it as is, assuming that either you set up the situation or you've created something different from it. And this is where we need to talk about how it's different from quoting. Much like in lay speech, the term quote in art is used the same way. When I start a speech, I have a dream, you know I'm going to be referencing Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech. And depending on how I take that, how I change the setup of the rhythm of the speech, may change how you think of it. But you're always going to be thinking about Martin Luther King in that specific moment and how he used that speech at that time. This can be used to incredibly effective levels. Most of the time not, honestly, with that speech, but most of the time when people are quoting that speech, they're using it in some weird way. But you can use this in an effective way in order to set a stage for what you're going to do. In a similar sort of way, artists do this on a fairly regular occasion. By understanding the original source material that is being quoted, you gain an additional understanding and an additional appreciation for the original work. Unfortunately, my favorite example of this is also going to make this video advertiser unfriendly. But we're going to talk about it anyway because it's my favorite and I feel like doing what I want. So just so you know, that's what we're talking about. Hide the kids. In 1865, Manet released Olympia onto the world, and it really messed with the Artistic Academy. The Art Academy at that time, which was literally a group of people who decided what was good and what was not, ended up running into this painting. A painting of, for those of you not up on your 1860s French lingo, is a term for a prostitute. What's interesting about this painting is it's quoting the old masters. The Academy really loved the Renaissance and the old masters. They believed that the Renaissance was the height of all progress and nothing could ever come that was better than the Renaissance masters. And to this day, there are still people who believe that falsely. Olympia is quoting specifically Titian's Venus of Urbino? I'm not pronouncing that right, but I am pronouncing Titian right. If you want to really make someone mad in the artistic community, pronounce it Titan. Really makes people mad. Anyway, Titian created this painting of a Venus, a perfected female form, the ultimate beauty, and she's looking at you, ready for your company. We're going to say company because that's what I can get away with on YouTube, but I hope you know what I mean. Anyway, while Titian's painting was made probably for some guy to hang in his bedroom for his enjoyment, Olympia is a much more aggressive, much more confrontational look. Where Titian's is inviting, Olympia is in control, and she is saying, well, I guess you've paid me with these flowers and you're ready for me, so I guess go ahead and get in here. This is a completely different way of dealing with a woman. As far as the Academy is concerned, she is asymmetrical. She is imperfect, whereas you could be painting a perfect woman because you can render anything. Manet has instead decided to subvert that. And by doing so, he has made a completely different painting. But it requires you to understand the original quote. By understanding that Titian's Venus is being quoted here, you understand everything that is wrong and different about this, and indeed the depth and the meat of the painting itself, where Titian has all of the middle tones fully painted. Olympia is a flat drawing. There are no middle tone. Later, another artist quoted this quote of another painting in order to do a picture where he dressed himself, and a lot of this artist's work, whose name I'm not going to even try to pronounce because I can't, ended up quoting Manet's work in his own work in order to talk about cultural appropriation in art, where people like Van Gogh would just steal concepts. He would argue that he is indeed stealing from Manet. However, I would consider it a quote because without the knowledge that this is a reference or a quote of another image, you would not have any legs to stand on with this image. You would not understand what it's about and why it's shaped and formed this way. By understanding the Manet, you understand this image. By understanding the Titian, you understand the Manet. So how is this different than ripping something off? Well, it kind of depends on whether or not the original image is supposed to be known. I think that's the main difference between a ripoff and a quote. Whereas a ripoff would hope that you don't notice that they actually did end up stealing this image in order to make their image. For example, the Metal Gear box art and the Terminator still that I'm showing on screen now. A good quote allows you to know that and understand something more about the image. Let's talk about a recent example of someone who did it right. How about Far Cry 5? I know that's a weird thing to bring up, but we're talking about video games. So this is obviously quoting Leonardo da Vinci's Last Supper. And what makes this good is you're supposed to know that. You're supposed to know that. And I realize that Leonardo's Last Supper is a very base level art reference, but it's one that you'll understand. So it's good. By understanding this, it allows you to know a little bit more about the video game. Whereas in the original, you have Jesus at the center and he is hanging out with his friends and also Judas. In the Far Cry 5 poster, you see the main antagonist, who is a cult leader, standing in the position where Jesus would be. He is saying, I am equal to Jesus, and these followers are equal to my disciples in that way. So by understanding the original source image, you understand a little bit more about his character. You understand a little bit more about the central antagonist and the plot that's going to be in place. He is a cult leader. He is controlling people. And rather than one-to-one copying everything, they've made some changes. For example, his followers are violent. Unlike Jesus, we have this man who is bowing himself down before a guy who's basically saying, I'm Jesus. It's very heretical, but he's a cult leader, and these people surrounding him believe him. Whether or not this game is good or not, whoever did this art design made this quote because you would know this. It enhances your understanding of the piece and it enhances your understanding of the product. That is ideal for a quote. Let's talk about another thing that happened at about the same time, because Ready Player One is not the only one who's in the spotlight here. At about the same time, we have the Solo poster and the Lando poster that came out for the announcement of the Solo movie. These are ripoffs because they hope that you don't know about the funk and jazz compilations. And by knowing about them, it doesn't change what I know about the thing. Does this imply that Han Solo was funky and that Lando somehow related to jazz? This doesn't make any sense. This doesn't help me understand anything about it. And so therefore it's a ripoff and not a quote. It's interesting to see that Star Wars actually ended up doing this because in the past they actually have successfully quoted something. More specifically, Empire Strikes Back successfully quoted Gone with the Wind. What is happening in the romantic subplot of The Empire Strikes Back? The parallels with it and Gone with the Wind are very interesting. By having that quote, you are given extra information about what's going to be in The Empire Strikes Back. This is a successful quote. If you didn't get that this is a quote, that's fine. You still can enjoy the poster. But if you did, then you get additional knowledge. Again, this is the difference between quoting and ripping off something. So let's get back to the Ready Player One posters and get to the final verdict. They expect that the viewer understands that it's referencing something else. The Back to the Future one is very clearly referencing that. It is very clearly quoting that original image. And by knowing that, you know something extra about the movie. And what do you know extra about the movie? That is basically just going to be constant callbacks to 80s culture. That does tell you extra about the movie. Is this good enough to meet any sort of legal standard? Is it parody in a good enough way for it not to be an issue? That's a different issue entirely. But for the sake of letting you know something extra about the movie, I feel like it does the job. It lets you know that it's going to not have any substance in of itself, but is going to constantly be making references to other things without having that strength in of itself. I don't want people to misunderstand me, so I made this graph. I don't think that they are doing a quote in the traditional sense. It relies heavily on you understanding that this is a direct reference to a previous thing, but does not add to it in any sort of way. That's why I say it is a good representation of the movie. It's just taking something that already was popular and pretending to be it, hoping that you don't notice the difference. Whereas normally with a quote, you would want to add more to it. Ready Player One does not add anything to the discussion. With a ripoff, they would hope you didn't notice that this is the case. This puts the Ready Player One posters in the uncomfortable, bad area right in the center of this triangle. Anything that kind of lands in this area is not very good. While I don't feel like this is a ripoff, because you're expected to know that, I do feel like the paintings, these posters, I should say, fail. It's going to be bad. It's going to be really bad. And that's my own personal opinion. But I hope that we've learned something. I hope that we've talked about this in such a way that we've learned the difference between ripping off something, referencing something, and quoting something. A reference uses the image to make a new original image. It doesn't expect that you know what the original thing is, because the original thing is never really talked about. You're looking at a bowl of fruits, you paint a bowl of fruits. That's fine. A ripoff, however, ends up expecting you not to know the original source material and hopes that you don't know it. A quote hopes that you know the original source material and hopes that it adds to your knowledge of the thing. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, let me know. If you didn't, let me know. Just doing something different for once. And I hope that it worked out, and I hope you learned something. Go ahead and feel free to discuss in the comments whether or not I'm wrong, whether or not you think Ready Player One's going to be any good, and your opinion on anything else that I threw up in this video. I hope you enjoyed it. See you next time. Bye.